The scene opens with the sounds of busy city life. The camera pans across the polished floors of a bustling shopping mall, capturing the soft chatter of shoppers, the shuffle of footsteps, and the hum of nearby conversations. The mall is filled with people walking past stores, browsing, and casually chatting. We zoom in on Jasmine, a confident 16-year-old black girl, striding through the mall with purpose. She's dressed casually in a stylish hoodie, jeans, and sneakers, and she holds her phone in one hand, texting a friend. Completely absorbed in her world, she exudes confidence and blends effortlessly with the mall's fast-paced energy. As Jasmine continues walking, she heads toward a high-end boutique at the mall's entrance, clearly planning to check out the new arrivals. The camera shifts to Karen, a middle-aged white woman standing by the entrance of the store. Karen wears designer clothes, her expression judgmental as her eyes narrow when she notices Jasmine approaching. The camera lingers for a moment on Karen's face as she watches Jasmine closely, her gaze filled with suspicion. It's a moment thick with tension, racial profiling taking shape without a word spoken. Jasmine nears the boutique, still unaware of the silent judgment happening behind her, but as she gets closer, Karen steps forward aggressively, blocking her path. Suddenly, and without warning, Karen grabs Jasmine's purse with force, yanking it sharply from her shoulder. "Stop right there!" Karen shouts, her voice loud and filled with authority, demanding the attention of everyone nearby. Jasmine freezes, her body stiff with confusion and shock. She looks down at her purse and then back at Karen. "What are you doing? Let go of my purse!" Jasmine protests, trying to pull back with an edge of panic in her voice. Karen glares at her, eyes narrowed in disdain. The camera zooms in on Karen's face, showing her clear belief in Jasmine's guilt. Karen points an accusing finger at Jasmine, her voice dripping with entitlement and condescension. "You've stolen something from my store?" she accuses, loudly enough for the surrounding shoppers to hear. The mall falls into an eerie silence, the bustling environment momentarily stilled as the onlookers look on, unsure of what to do. The tension builds as more people begin to gather around, whispering among themselves. Jasmine, still in disbelief, stands frozen. Her confusion turns to anger as she looks directly at Karen, trying to process what is happening. "What? I didn't take anything," Jasmine responds firmly, her voice steady, though her hands are shaking with the shock of being wrongly accused. Jasmine's face is a mixture of disbelief, anger, and the beginning of fear, as she realizes she's being racially profiled in front of a crowd. Karen's voice grows louder, her accusations becoming more extreme as the onlookers stand still, their eyes trained on the confrontation unfolding before them. "You think I didn't see you slip something into your bag?" Karen sneers, her voice dripping with venom and entitlement. "You black people always think you can get away with things like this." Her words sting sharply, the racial undertones clear, but Jasmine refuses to let the hurt show. Her heart races and her stomach churns, but she stands tall, fighting the wave of emotion threatening to overcome her. Jasmine feels the weight of the racism in Karen's words, the unfairness of it all, but she pushes those feelings deep down. There's no room for weakness now. She pulls at her purse again, her hand gripping the strap, trying to reclaim it from Karen's iron grasp. But Karen grips it even tighter, her face twisted with self-righteousness. "What's in your bag?" Karen demands, yanking the purse even closer to herself, her eyes scanning it with distrust. "I know exactly what you did." She searches Jasmine's face for any sign of guilt, as though determined to find something to justify her behavior. Jasmine stands still, her body tense with frustration. She takes a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "You're wrong. I didn't steal anything. You have no right to do this." Her voice cracks slightly, but she quickly steadies it, refusing to let Karen see her shaking. The humiliation starts to settle in. The eyes of the crowd are on her, some looking uncomfortable, others more focused on pulling out their phones to record the confrontation. The weight of being watched, judged, is crushing. Jasmine feels exposed, vulnerable, like she's on trial in front of everyone. The camera lingers on her face for a moment, capturing the storm of emotions that play across her features. She stands firm, but the fear is there, buried beneath the defiance. She's been caught in the glare of racial prejudice, and there's nowhere to hide. Karen doesn't back down. Her voice rises as she hurls more accusations. "I know what you're trying to do! I'm calling the police!" She finally declares, her tone final and dismissive. Jasmine's pulse quickens, her throat tightens, and her hands shake as she stands there, waiting for the inevitable. Karen's actions have already made it clear that the police are the next step. Jasmine stands frozen, her mind racing. She's done nothing wrong, but it feels as though the entire world has turned against her. The sharp sting of injustice lingers in her chest. Tears threaten to form, but Jasmine swallows them down, refusing to let Karen see her as anything other than unshaken, strong, and resolute. Not today. Not here. The sound of distant sirens begins to grow louder in the background, signaling that the police are on their way. Jasmine's breath catches, her stomach tightening with dread. She knows all too well how situations like this can spiral out of control. The thought of the police arriving fills her with a sense of helplessness. Will they side with her, or will they side with Karen, the entitled, judgmental woman? Jasmine's mind races. She's had enough of being treated this way, of being judged and accused based solely on her race. This time, she's not going to let it slide. She refuses to let Karen define her, to let the world see her as something she's not. She deserves respect just like anyone else. But how can she make Karen see that? How can she make the people watching see that? As the sirens grow louder and the tension rises, Jasmine takes a step back, standing tall. She doesn't have to say anything anymore. Her presence, her confidence, speaks volumes, and as she looks around at the growing crowd, at the people who are recording her every move, something inside her snaps. This is her moment. This is her stand. She's not going to let this woman or this situation define her. Jasmine doesn't say another word. She stands there, holding Karen's gaze, her posture straight, her chin raised, her eyes unwavering. The silence between them stretches on, filled only by the blaring sirens in the distance. But then, a voice interrupts the tension, the voice of Officer Taylor, one of the mall's regular security officers, who has been watching from a distance. The camera turns to reveal him, stepping forward with authority, his face grim but resolute. "What's going on here?" he asks, his gaze moving between Jasmine and Karen. He has been in the mall long enough to recognize trouble when he sees it, but the way he looks at Jasmine, his eyes filled with curiosity and something like concern, suggests he isn't buying Karen's accusation. Karen opens her mouth, ready to speak again, but Officer Taylor raises a hand, stopping her. "I've been watching this whole thing. Is that true, Jasmine? Did you steal anything?" Jasmine nods firmly, not speaking, but her body language says everything. She doesn't need to say another word. The look in Officer Taylor's eyes is enough for her to know that he's seen what's happened here. Karen's face pales, her accusations faltering in the face of Officer Taylor's presence. The camera captures her nervous glance at the growing crowd, the realization dawning on her that she's outnumbered and exposed. It's only moments before the police arrive, and when they do, they ask Officer Taylor to explain what happened. The scene shifts as Officer Taylor gives a clear, calm recount of what he witnessed, a scene where Jasmine did nothing but stand her ground, and Karen, despite her accusations, was caught in her own deceit. The officers move to take Karen aside, while Officer Taylor steps closer to Jasmine, offering a small nod of respect. The tension begins to ebb, and Jasmine breathes out a sigh of relief. She wasn't alone in this, and someone finally recognized the truth. As Karen is led away by the officers, her face flushed with embarrassment, Jasmine's composure returns. The crowd disperses slowly, the judgment fading away. Within minutes, the wail of sirens pierces the air as two police cars pull up in front of the scene. Officer Martin, a white male in his 30s with a hardened expression, steps out of his vehicle, his uniform crisp and neat. Officer Davis, a black woman in her 40s, follows him, her posture upright and commanding. The camera captures their arrival, the stark contrast between the two officers setting the tone for what's about to unfold. Officer Martin looks around, his eyes immediately locking onto Jasmine. He doesn't waste a moment. His judgment seems instantaneous. Without so much as a glance at Karen, he steps forward, his eyes narrowing. What's going on here? His voice is filled with suspicion as he looks Jasmine over, already assuming the worst. Karen, seizing the moment, points directly at Jasmine. "This girl stole something from my store. I want her arrested right now," she exclaims, her voice rising in indignation. The camera cuts to Karen, her face red with anger, as she stands tall, clearly convinced of Jasmine's guilt. Her accusation hangs in the air like a heavy weight. Officer Martin, without hesitation, nods and takes a step toward Jasmine. His expression hardens, his body language suggesting he's already decided Jasmine's fate. Jasmine's heart sinks at the sight of him moving closer. It feels like the walls are closing in. She hasn't done anything wrong, but in that moment, it seems like the world is against her. However, before Officer Martin can make any further moves, Officer Davis steps forward, a steady presence in the chaos. "Hold on a second, Officer Martin. Let's hear both sides of the story." Her voice is calm but firm, asserting a sense of order amidst the rising tension. Officer Martin hesitates, surprised by the intervention, and takes a step back, giving Officer Davis room to take control of the situation. His face betrays a flash of irritation, but he says nothing, choosing to remain silent as Officer Davis turns her attention to Jasmine. Officer Davis faces Jasmine, her eyes soft yet authoritative, a stark contrast to the earlier judgment. "What happened here?" she asks, her tone reassuring, as if offering Jasmine the opportunity to speak her truth without fear. Jasmine, still shaken by the events and the escalating tension, takes a deep breath to steady herself. "She grabbed my purse and accused me of stealing," she begins, her voice steadying with each word. "I didn't do anything. I was just walking by." As Jasmine recounts the situation, the camera zooms in on her face, capturing the vulnerability mixed with rising frustration. It's clear that this isn't just about a purse, it's about the injustice of being accused, of being seen as guilty before being given a chance to speak. Karen doesn't take kindly to Jasmine's version of the story. "She's lying! I saw her steal from me!" Karen interrupts, her voice cracking with anger and the desperation of being proven right. Officer Davis calmly holds up her hand, a gesture for silence, and then turns to Karen. "You've made a serious accusation, ma'am, but we need to hear the full story before jumping to conclusions." Her words are firm yet measured, demonstrating a deep sense of professionalism that sets the tone for what's to come. The crowd around them has fallen silent, now watching closely as the interaction between the officers and Karen unfolds. The weight of the situation is becoming palpable, and the tension is thick in the air. It's clear now that something bigger is at play, something much deeper than the petty theft Karen claims. Officer Davis, undeterred, shifts her focus back to Karen, her gaze unwavering. "Do you have any proof of this accusation?" she asks, her tone respectful but unyielding. "You can't just accuse someone of theft without evidence." Karen falters at this question, her face flushing a deep shade of red. For the first time, she stumbles, her certainty cracking. The camera captures the subtle shift in Karen's demeanor as her facade begins to crumble. She has no proof, only her suspicion and racial bias. Karen's silence speaks volumes as she tries to come up with a response, but the moment is lost. Officer Davis, now in full control of the situation, looks around at the onlookers. "You've made a serious accusation, and we can't just act on your word. We need facts," she adds, her gaze flicking to the crowd that had gathered to witness the drama unfold. The crowd murmurs in agreement, some nodding their heads as they finally begin to understand the dynamics at play. They're beginning to see Karen's attempt to discredit Jasmine as a reckless, baseless accusation driven by her own prejudices. Jasmine stands tall, her posture now more confident. She isn't just a victim of Karen's accusation anymore. She's reclaiming her narrative, and the officers, especially Officer Davis, are starting to see her for who she truly is. Karen's face is now a mix of embarrassment and frustration. She realizes that her power to intimidate and accuse Jasmine has been stripped away. The validation she sought from the police has slipped through her fingers. In the midst of the silence, Officer Martin steps back slightly, his expression now conflicted. He has witnessed the quiet but undeniable strength of Officer Davis and the growing understanding of the situation by the crowd. Jasmine's composure has left an undeniable mark. Officer Davis gives Jasmine a small, approving nod before turning her attention back to Karen, and her voice takes on a finality that leaves no room for doubt. "We'll be reviewing the mall's security footage to verify your claims, ma'am, but based on the evidence and your behavior, I'm inclined to believe you're not telling the whole truth." Karen opens her mouth to protest, but the words never come. The reality of the situation settles in, and she realizes there's no escaping the consequences of her actions. The camera holds a tight shot on Karen's face, capturing her stunned realization as her influence begins to slip away. The officers, despite the awkwardness of the situation, begin to move away, leaving the scene to return to its natural state. The crowd starts to disperse, murmuring among themselves, but Jasmine knows that today she stood her ground. And in doing so, she not only reclaimed her power, but also showed everyone what real courage looks like. As the tension in the air mounts, the murmurs of the crowd grow louder. Karen, still standing with her arms crossed, begins to shift uncomfortably under the scrutiny. She can feel the heat of the moment. Everything she believed she could control is slipping through her fingers. Officer Davis steps forward, her presence commanding the attention of the crowd. "Ma'am, what you've done here is not only a mistake, it's racial profiling," Officer Davis states firmly, her voice cutting through the charged atmosphere. The words hang in the air, an undeniable truth that lands with a heavy weight. She turns to face the growing crowd, her gaze sweeping across the onlookers who are now fully engaged in the unfolding situation. This young woman is being accused simply because of how she looks. Karen opens her mouth to respond, but no words come out. The confidence she once held is draining from her, leaving her speechless. The camera zooms in on her face, capturing her growing discomfort and the crack in her self-assurance. She falters, looking for a way to defend herself, but there is no denying the truth in Officer Davis's words. The camera then lingers on Karen's face, her initial defiance turning to frustration and humiliation. She can feel the eyes of the crowd on her, some of them staring with judgment, while others cast sideways glances at Jasmine, who stands tall despite the momentary fear. The humiliation of being called out in front of everyone is clearly visible, and Karen knows she's losing control of the situation. The bystanders, who had been hesitant and unsure of what was happening, now begin to shift in their positions. Some look at Jasmine with silent support, their eyes softening as they realize the unfairness of the situation. Others glance back at Karen, now seeing her in a new light, one where her actions no longer seem justified. Officer Davis, sensing the shift in the crowd's perception, addresses them with a powerful and compassionate voice. This is a perfect example of what happens when people are judged unfairly. And this is why we, as a society, need to do better. We cannot allow our biases to dictate the way we treat others. Her words are filled with authority, but also a deep understanding of the systemic issues that often go unnoticed. The crowd listens attentively, their expressions now reflecting a mix of realization and reflection. Officer Davis's words resonate in the air, a call for change that reaches beyond just this moment. She's not just speaking to Karen, she's speaking to everyone watching. Officer Davis turns back to Karen, her tone unwavering but compassionate. You don't get to judge someone based on their appearance. That's not how the law works, and that's not how we treat each other as human beings. This young woman has done nothing wrong. She's not a thief, and you have no right to treat her as one. Karen, now completely defeated, stumbles for words. Her previous arrogance has been shattered, and she realizes she is completely outmatched. The crowd, once silent and unsure, now stands behind Jasmine. The shift is unmistakable. The once confident and entitled woman has been exposed for what she truly is, someone who sought to impose her own biases without evidence, without reason. The camera focuses on Jasmine's face, showing her resilience and strength in this moment. She remains calm, her posture still erect, but her eyes reveal a mixture of anger and disbelief. She hasn't just fought for herself in this moment. She's fought for something bigger. She's fought for justice, for dignity, and for her right to be seen as a human being, not just a stereotype. Karen, now realizing the weight of her actions, lowers her head, her face flushed with embarrassment and regret. She knows that she has no defense for her behavior, no justification that will ease the judgment now cast upon her. The crowd's perception of her has shifted, and the power she once held has completely dissolved. The camera captures the look of defeat on her face, a woman who tried to assert her dominance but has failed spectacularly. As the silence lingers in the air, Officer Davis steps back, giving Jasmine the space she needs to reclaim the narrative. The shift in the atmosphere is palpable. The tension, which once hung heavy, is now replaced with a quiet, shared understanding. The crowd begins to disperse, some continuing to stare at Karen with judgment, others offering Jasmine a subtle nod of support. Officer Martin, who had remained silent through most of Officer Davis's intervention, now looks at her with a new sense of respect. His earlier bias, though still present in the back of his mind, has been challenged, and though he hasn't fully processed everything, the situation has opened his eyes to the complexities of what just happened. Jasmine, however, stands in the middle of it all, proud and unbroken. She looks at the officers, her voice steady, but filled with the weight of her experience. I hope you both learned something from this, she says, her words leaving an imprint on the moment. This isn't just about me. It's about everyone who's been judged unfairly. With that, she walks away from the scene, her steps purposeful and resolute. The camera follows her, capturing her strength and poise, a young woman who has faced injustice head-on and come out victorious. Her journey is far from over, but in this moment, she has reclaimed her power, and the world is starting to see her for who she truly is. As the camera fades to black, the screen fills with a powerful message. Justice is not just about the law. It's about dignity. It's about respect. And it's about time we stand up for what's right. As the crowd begins to thin, the final sting of the moment lingers in the air. Karen, her face still flushed with humiliation, stands silently for a few moments, processing the weight of the scene. Her pride has crumbled, and the realization of her mistake sinks in. Slowly, she turns toward Jasmine, the words coming out in a weak, faltering apology. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Her voice trails off, the apology hanging in the air, ineffective and hollow. There's no sincerity left in her tone, only the uncomfortable acknowledgement of being exposed for what she truly is. Her shoulders slump, and the arrogance that once defined her demeanor has now dissolved into something far more vulnerable. Shame. Officer Davis, though not one to dwell on others' mistakes, gives Karen one last look. Her gaze is firm, yet not unkind, understanding that real change begins with accountability. I hope you've learned something today, she says, her voice still full of authority but lacking any further judgment. She turns toward Jasmine, giving her a nod of reassurance, a silent acknowledgement of the strength she has shown throughout this entire ordeal. Jasmine stands for a moment, letting the weight of the situation finally lift from her shoulders. The intense pressure of being wrongly accused, the humiliation, the judgment, all of it begins to fade away. A quiet sense of relief washes over her as she takes a deep breath. The camera zooms in on her face, showing the pride, the strength, and the resilience that's always been there, now fully visible. The crowd, once silent and uneasy, begins to disperse, some lingering for a moment longer, their eyes following Jasmine. The tension that had filled the space moments ago is now gone. Jasmine's head is held high as she turns and begins walking away, the camera following her as she strides confidently down the hallway. Her movements are deliberate and strong, the empowerment in her walk unmistakable. She has reclaimed her dignity. The weight of baseless accusations, of stereotypes placed upon her, is gone. In its place is a young woman, proud and unbroken. The video cuts to a close-up of her face, her eyes filled with a quiet strength, a mix of resolve and hope. The voiceover begins, soft yet powerful. Racism isn't something we should accept. It's something we should stand against, every time. As the words echo in the background, the camera slowly pulls away from Jasmine, capturing her walking with confidence, no longer a victim of someone's prejudice. Her presence fills the screen, a symbol of resilience and courage in the face of injustice.